You are listening to the HP Outdoors Waterfowl Podcast, episode 62. This week on the show, we're talking advanced waterfowl strategies. We're going to cover some tips and tricks to help you take your waterfowl hunting to the next level. All right, welcome to the 62nd episode of the HP Outdoors Waterfowl Podcast. We are your on-demand audio source for all things waterfowl and waterfowl hunting. You can check us out at hpoutdoors.com. You can also find us across all of the different social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. If you are on Facebook and you'd like to engage with us, we have a listeners group that you can search, the HP Outdoors Waterfowl Podcast listeners group. Join us in there and chat with a bunch of the listeners of this show about all things waterfowl and ask your questions and all that good stuff. Joining me today on the show, as well as in the listeners group, is Minivan Dan Harushka. Dan, what's up, man?
What up? Oh man,
I don't even know where to go with that.
Yeah, there's nowhere to go. I always make a comment about the weather and just, I was talking to Trav today about, how much duck hunting we did this past year and how just weird the weather was. And, Conneaut Lake here, where you grew up, where I'm still living, is absolutely packed with birds right now. The whole north end is just divers and swans and, it's just like, it's a little bit of heaven down there. It's cool to drive by and just see just thousands of birds on the lake. I'll stop. I need to get some pictures. I haven't had time, but definitely need to get down there and, just adding to the weird weather. It was 70 degrees at the end of February and now it's March 15th and single digits and just weird year.
Yeah, it's, we were talking the other day on text. I'm seeing more ducks right now here locally than I saw at all during the regular season. And, water ponds that are holding ducks that never held ducks, in the last couple of years that I can recall. I'm seeing a lot more birds right now, which is kind of strange. And, we just had a snowstorm come through and, weird funky weather. And like you said, it's spring feeling in February and all that kind of stuff. And, it was just weird because at the end of the season there, mid-February for us, I felt like we lost a lot of our geese and the hunting was really tough. We didn't really do that great our last couple hunts because, it just seemed like a lot of our birds left the area. And like right now, I can't hardly find any, geese. I'm starting to see geese pair up a good bit, but the big numbers are pretty much gone, it seems like. But the ducks, for whatever reason, seem to be here.
Yeah, we have tons of pairs. And whenever I drive by a field, and I'll look and I'll be like, man, there's 300 geese in that field. Where are they during the season? And then I'll be like, there was someone hunting that this day or that day and whatever. But like what you're saying down there, most of those ponds that you're driving by probably do not get hunted, right?
Yeah, most of them never do.
Yeah. So, I can see fields that getting pressure up here don't have birds in it or they're really, tucked in somewhere, but they're making the round trip. And like I said, it was just a weird year. The numbers were hit and miss, and the weather was, if we weren't locked up, then it was hot, and it was just, I don't know, it's hunting. That's part of it.
Yeah, no doubt. No question. And that's kind of what led me to, us picking this topic for this week. And, we're calling it advanced waterfowl strategies, but really, this topic is kind of geared towards those guys that are, maybe a year, 2, maybe 3 years into waterfowl hunting. And they're at the point where, they've got it, right? They've got the bug. They're all in. They've made the decision. Okay, I've been hunting with buddies or whatever. Now I'm ready to start building my own spread, or I'm starting to do, kind of do my own thing a little bit more and just kind of get more involved in the game. So we're going to talk a little bit about some strategies that are kind of, some of them we've talked about in the past, and some of them aren't like groundbreaking, techniques, but they're things that guys that if they haven't been exposed to it, might not think about, and it might make a difference for them. And really where I'm at this point of the year is I'm looking towards the off season and what can I learn from this past year and what can I do this off season that will put me in a better position to be more successful this coming season. So whether that's obtain more properties, get more gear, fine tune gear, work on calling, whatever it is, this is the time when good hunters, people that have success year in and year out, instead of taking a break, they kind of put their foot on the gas and start really, doing things that's going to separate them. So we'll talk a little bit about some of those tips. We each have kind of our top 5 that we thought about. But before we did that, I wanted to cover 2 things that I've, kind of done since our last episode, I guess. And one was I went up to the Great American Outdoor Show in Harrisburg. And this is the first time that I've been to it since the NRA has taken over. And it was a good experience. I went up on a Friday and it was packed. I mean, jammed packed, and I'm sure it was worse on weekends. But what I will say is that, again, this is central Pennsylvania, so this is prime, deer hunting, big game area. And there was a small amount of waterfowl vendors and stuff like that there. It was mostly big game focused, but the main thing that took me up there was Field Hudnall of Field Proven Calls was giving a seminar. It was, free included with the price of admission. So I was like, I'm going to take a day, go up there and check it out. And I'd met Field in the past and always enjoyed talking with him, knew him and Clay were good people and stuff. So went to the booth, talked with him for a few minutes. I shouldn't say a few minutes, 45 minutes to an hour before the seminar, and just, blew all the calls he had, talked to him about different things, got some tips on, and he sat there and worked with me calling and stuff. Just really, really good dude. I really can't, speak highly enough of those guys, but he gave a seminar, which was really cool. And if you ever get a chance to go to these seminars and hear guys like Field that just spend so much time in the field, it's just a different, it's just a different experience. And those guys have so much knowledge just because they've spent so much time. So I picked up a ton of that, and kind of where I'm going with this is that when we talk about these advanced strategies and stuff like that, it's not like any of these are just me groundbreaking things that nobody else in the waterfowl industry knows. You know what I mean? It's, you're picking something up from an article that you read here, you pick something up from a seminar that you went to there, or a hunting buddy, or your old man told you something here. All of these things we just kind of pile together, and, it shapes us to be the hunters that we are. And that's really all that this is. It's just another tool that you can use kind of in your toolbox to help you be a better hunter. So, sidetracking a little bit, the show was cool. It's huge. I mean, there is tons of stuff there, much more, as you might imagine, gun, tactical, that element that I don't recall being there in the past, but still a ton of outfitters, tons of cool stuff. One of my favorite parts was I got to handle the Benelli Super Black Eagle 3. That's an amazing, amazing firearm. I'm really impressed with it, and might save up some pennies and try to get one here at some point.
I was going to say, you sound like you're kind of in love with that.
Well, the gun just, I don't know. It just fits the way that I feel like a shotgun's supposed to fit when I put it to my shoulder. Yeah, I can't really say anything more other than, that, and the fact that they've fixed the situation where if you, in the previous Benellis, if you'd hit the stock, it would kind of come out of battery a little bit where the gun may not fire. That is gone. So,
well, that was the Benelli click, right?
Yeah, that's the Benelli click. And I've seen it on Stogers and other guns that use a similar firing mechanism. So they've addressed that, which is cool.
Is it the firing mechanism, or is it like you can't let it down, you have to let it slam shut?
I think
I thought that's what Trav said because he
I don't own a Benelli. I've just shouldered them, so I don't know exactly, but from what I've seen, guys that I've hunted with that have had it happen, it seemed to happen when they would set their gun down, and it would jar from the bottom. So if you didn't close the action hard enough, I guess it would do that. So maybe it was the combination of both. I'm not exactly sure, but I've seen the result. I've seen guys pull up and they go click.
Yeah.
So that was enough to worry me. But when I bought my shotgun a couple years back, my Outlander, if I would have had the money at the time, I would have bought a Benelli Super Black Eagle too, because I've always loved that gun, the way it feels, the way it fits, all that. So just because that's fixed, that's an awesome benefit, but it wouldn't have prevented me from buying the gun anyway. So, but it was cool to get my hands on one of those. And, the rest of it was pretty cool. It was just, it's always fun walking around and checking things out, but I was surprised by the lack of waterfowl related people. I mean, Field Proven was there, had a booth. Sean Mann was there. Jeff Foyles and whatever that new company that he's got going, or that name, I don't know what the deal with is that, but they were there.
Rock.
And then there was a couple others. Yeah, I don't really know. Even I didn't get a chance to talk to him or anything, so I don't really know. But there was a couple other smaller guys, maybe 2 or 3 small guys, but I thought I might see Zinc or Avian X up there with like a turkey, what's the guy? Is it Matt Moret, I think is his name, or something like that, who's their marketing guy. He's a central Pennsylvania guy, big turkey hunter.
They weren't there?
I thought we might. No, I didn't see him there.
Huh.
So if they were, I missed it. But yeah, anyway, lots of boats to look at.
Where's that at? Because that's it has to be a big venue, right?
Yeah, it's at a a farm, I don't know, big livestock farm area. I mean, it's got like an indoor arena where they have you would think of like a college basketball team could play in there, big seating. They have concerts in there. I'm drawing a blank on the name of it right now, but it's huge. I mean, it is huge. So
nice.
Really cool thing. Just a neat opportunity, a bunch of outdoor folks coming together. So, and then the other thing I wanted to mention, Dan, is, with you working in the oil and gas industry and me also previously, I saw an article on Delta Waterfowl the other day. This was a while back now. I just kind of forgot that I had saved it. And the article was about fracking and just oil and gas exploration and, the production of it all and its impact on nesting waterfowl, particularly in the Dakota region, And the study actually found that the production of oil and gas in those areas had little to no impact on the nesting ducks, and in fact may have had a slight benefit on the nesting duck success. And I thought it was interesting because they say they believe that the reason for this is that the number one detrimental thing to nesting success is predators, right? So
right.
With increased human activity around these nests, some predators will automatically avoid the area because of the human presence, and others will be essentially killed by human presence. So, a guy on the rig's got a rifle in his truck, he might shoot a coyote or shoot a fox or something like that. So they believe that this activity alone seemed to have a positive impact on the survival of some of these nesting ducks. So I thought that was pretty cool because most people want to assume that kind of thing with negative impacts on wildlife in general.
Right.
So this was a success story, in the sense that just the fact that they're there helps these ducks to be more successful. Now, what they're doing there, I don't particularly know what those impacts are, but hey,
right.
And that's nesting ducks is good.
The fracking, I think, gets a bad rap just because the only time it makes the news is when there's a blowout or a leak or something, an explosion, and it does do a lot of harm to the environment when that stuff happens, or you get the bad apple that is dumping the wastewater, and obviously I don't stand for that stuff and would never do that. And so they should probably get fined more than what they do. But, it is a relatively safe practice. And, going back to North Dakota, the North Dakota access pipeline there with it came out, was it 1.1 million to clean up what the protesters left behind there, and
right,
how many dogs did they have to save that they left? I mean, that's incredible. So, we could go on there for days, but going back to central Pennsylvania, I was supposed to go on a snow goose hunt with my brother, and
right,
Middle Creek area out there, and it just, the week prior, I think that they were up, 60, 70,000 snow geese in there, and then the beginning of the week, I was supposed to go Friday, the beginning of the week, the estimates went down to like 20,000, and I was like, hey, ask that guy, how did they do, that was on a Monday, and I said, ask him how they did this past weekend, and I think they killed like 4 geese, and they only saw like 2 groups, and I was like, you know what, I'm not going to make that trip to lay in a field and pay the money for it. So, and I think Pennsylvania is just tough for a snow goose hunt. I think snow goose hunting is difficult enough as it is, where there's 100,000 or a couple 100,000, let alone once you go from 70 to 20, the chances didn't look real hot. So we called that off. It was disappointing, but maybe next year I'll be ready at the drop of a hat when it really gets hot. But there's that. So
yeah, that's how it's worked from what I've seen people be successful on the East Coast here. Eastern Pennsylvania, Maryland, Eastern Shore, those kinds of areas. It's like you got to be with somebody who's up there watching every day, and then when they say tomorrow's the day, like you need to be there. You know what I mean? So it's very difficult to plan a hunt 3 months in advance or whatever and be successful when you're snow goose hunting. At least that's what it seems like.
And here's another thing too. So it was the Wednesday before that Bad Monday report came out, and my brother, he said, well, it was Tuesday, and he said, can you make it tomorrow? Which made me think, yeah, it's really hot. Well, then he sends me a picture that the guide sent him, and down in the very bottom, I don't think my brother didn't even see it. I didn't even say anything to him, but there was a watermark on it from 2015.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's a ton of geese in it, but I'm like, this a couple years ago, like what is this guy trying to do? So I'm not going to name names. Yeah, so that was kind of another reason where it just shut down, and let them do their thing, I guess.
Yeah, I think that it's just risky business in general, and Lord knows there's a lot of outfitters and stuff that are doing exactly what you're talking about. So
right,
it's kind of hard to know unless you're there yourself and you're seeing the bird activity and all that kind of stuff. But
yeah,
right.
I was going to say two more short things.
Okay.
The Sitka is coming out with some new waterfowl gear. They did drop a women's line, which I don't think they have the women's line in waterfowl yet. They might be coming out, but I think that's just big game stuff. But, the gradient pants are amazing, and they're coming out with a gradient jacket, which will be like the best sweatshirt ever, pretty much. There's a gradient hoodie and a gradient jacket, so I'm a big fan of the pant, and I think that I might end up getting one of those. Definitely not just an insulation layer, or if it's not raining or snowing, it'd be good to wear as an outer layer. And the Dakota pant seems like it would be fairly durable, and I think the wind stopper, so a mid to late season pant that you could layer up and be comfortable in. So just a couple things there. And then my last thing before we...
With the Sitka thing, I went up to their booth, and they had some stuff, mostly the subalpine big game stuff, but they had the new waterfowl kind of sling pack, I guess you would call it, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting because, I've talked about my struggles with gear. I mean, Lord knows I've talked about my lanyard situation, all these things. Well, blind bags is kind of a similar deal for me. And I like the traditional blind bag, but I find it always just to be too small when I'm trying to have gloves and hats and binoculars and cameras and all that kind of stuff and thermoses. It's just too small.
Your thermos takes up a good third of your pack.
Without a question. It's just, it is what it is. So I've went to the full choke, which is a backpack style blind bag, and it's been great. I mean, I've enjoyed it for the most part, but I found myself, for whatever reason, kind of nitpicking it this year and looking to change to something else potentially. I looked at the sling pack. It looked really small to me. I just don't know how, when you go with ergonomics to where, like, it has to shape your body and all these things, you sacrifice things, right? I mean, these big traditional blind bags are these big square things that you can set under the bench in your pit or behind your head in the layout blind or whatever, and they hold tons of stuff. They just take up a lot of room. The backpack I like because I can throw it on my back when I'm in the canoe or something like that, so it doesn't take up floor space. The sling pack, when they show it in the marketing, the guy's wearing it in the front.
Yeah.
Not like in the back, so I never even thought about that, but I still just, I'll be interested to see what kind of feedback people give that, because they essentially phased out the half choke and swapped it with this sling pack. So
turned it around.
It'll be interesting to see if it catches on, but after evaluating everything, I think the full choke is probably the best fit for my needs, but I'll be interested to see what people like that sling pack style.
I think if you have a mile hike or something like that, and you have a decoy bag that is like a backpack, and you put this up front with your shells and gloves and hat or whatever else you need in there, if you're not carrying the kitchen sink, I think it would work out pretty well. But like you said, I think I'd have to look at it and see what actually can fit in there, because I have it up right now.
Yeah, I mean, for a guy like you who takes a DSLR full size with him pretty much every time he hunts, I don't see how you hunt with anything else than a big bag. You know what I mean? Because you've got the camera, and you got to protect said camera, and if you've got anything else, your shells, your lanyard, a drink or snacks or whatever. I mean, it adds up quick. I don't see how.
It's almost like a jump shoot pack.
Yeah, I mean, I could see it for quick hunts, or, I mean, I guess if you're hunting from a boat primarily and you just keep a lot of your stuff in the boat itself, you don't need to keep as much in the bag, but I don't know. Maybe I'm on an island here. I don't know.
Well, it does say that there's a beverage sleeve that keeps your coffee or water easily accessible, so. But yeah, the camera definitely, it definitely takes up some room. Definitely. So yeah.
All right, what's your last?
I was gonna say what Barton has going with a couple other guys there, the Cornerstone Gundog Academy. Till the end of the month, like, they have a ton of videos and it's all instructional stuff. Till the end of the month, the code word founders will get you half off of that, and you will be a member for life. So if you are thinking about getting a dog or have a dog and want to train it, I would probably do that. I think it's like a $600 membership. So if you get in now, it's $300, and there's no fees for the rest of your life, and you can get all the info that you need there. So I think it's a pretty good deal.
Very good.
And that's all my info.
Okay, cool. Well, we're 25 minutes into the episode, and we haven't even, not quite that far yet. We haven't even get into our waterfowl strategies yet, so let's go ahead and jump into that right now. And why don't you start, Dan? And these are not in any particular order as far as what's more important or not, but these are just kind of things that we thought about when brainstorming. And in all transparency for everyone here, we do not prepare these together, so there may be some overlap here in some of the areas that we talk about, but we'll just see how it goes. So go ahead, Dan, send the first one.
Yeah. And like you said, this is, we're calling it advanced techniques, but we get so many questions from like you said, the third, fourth year, even second year. And I mean, even the guys that hunted one year and they want to know a little bit more, how could I avoid this? Or, my wife doesn't like you guys because I'm hooked, or stuff like that. But anyway, one thing that we say all the time, and it is a next step, and it will change your duck hunting, and it actually goes back to field hunting, but adding geese to the duck spread. We found, and field finds the same thing, that the ducks don't like to fly over the geese to land, so always have geese on the upwind side. But that one tip to land more ducks, and it's also a visual aid to have the goose decoys in there.
So Field actually talked about this at length in his seminar, and he talked about his typical hunting situation, and he hunts public water. I believe it's the Ohio River, and they will set, I think he said it's 110 floater geese decoys, Canada geese. And he says, the geese will not land with ducks, but ducks have no problems landing with geese. So he throws out and he spreads it out, makes it look as natural as possible, and they hunt out of a big blind so they can cover a large, stretch of water. So the spread itself might be close to 100 yards wide or something like that. He said, and maybe it's not that far. Maybe I'm making that up, but it's an expansive stretch, so that like when birds come in, you're not trying to circle them into one little funnel right in front of this blind. If there's two guys hunting down on the right end of the blind, they've got essentially, they're hunting different water than the guys that are on the left end of the blind. The blind's that big, but they try to spread it out to just make it look like a mass of comfortable looking geese. And, like you said, it's more visual. They've got better pulling power. And, when you hunt an area that, I think he described it as, they don't shoot a lot of anything, but they shoot a little bit of everything. So they'll shoot Canada geese, mallards, black ducks, pintails, all the whole deal. I mean, the gamut kind of, and it's kind of similar to where it is where I'm at too. I mean, we kind of have a similar situation, but these ducks associate safety with numbers of geese. So if you've got Canada geese in your area, I do not believe will be hurt at all by throwing more Canada geese in front of you during waterfowl season, whether you're pursuing ducks or geese. I think absolutely will be a benefit. So,
and I like that we're doing this right now because, like you said, you can put your foot on the gas and get ready for next season. And, you might find, we've had it in the listeners group of how to repaint old decoys. And I have 10 in my garage right now that I repainted and they look great. So, a lot of garage sales and stuff coming up. So if you need to add some, keep your eye out when you're driving down the road.
Yeah. And I think this is a good time of year to talk about this because like right now for me, I know I need more floater goose decoys. Based on what I saw last year, I need more floater geese. So that's what I'm targeting primarily right now. And I have my reasons for doing that based on the places I hunt, etc. But you might have a certain situation where you need to address it through gear or something like that. So hopefully one of these things that we say will jar something for you. And again, you'll take it away as a positive and be able to use it. And my point is going to dovetail off of yours a little bit. And this is something that Field mentioned during his seminar. And I thought this was really smart and it makes sense. But, he started talking about goose decoys. And he said his favorite goose decoy is a shell decoy. And I was shocked, because he's like, who here can get, what do you guys think my favorite decoy is? I thought he was going to say, silhouettes or full body or whatever. He likes shells. And he said, specifically, I like sleeper shells. And I'm like, okay, that, I don't hunt over any sleeper shells right now. I mean, I know late in the year, you put them on ice, this, that, and the other, people do that, but I was kind of a little bit baffled as to why he would say that. He went on to explain, he says, geese have to feed, right? He's like, if they don't eat, they die. So he's like, geese will feed in areas that they're not 100% comfortable in. They will force themselves into an area that they're not that comfortable in to feed, to survive. He says they will not sleep in an area where they do not feel comfortable. So he loves hunting over sleeper shells because it represents the utmost comfortable and confidence for birds coming in to know, hey, there's geese that are sleeping there. They must be feeling pretty good about the situation. And I'm like, man, that makes a ton of sense to me. You know, it just makes sense when you break it down to that level. So, yeah, sleeper shells. I'm in the market because I know they're good to set on ice and things like that late in the year when you're trying to show them loafing. But if a goose is comfortable enough to lay down and sleep somewhere, yeah, it makes a lot of sense, I think.
Man, that, I'll dovetail off that one. And my next point is putting more birds on land. Especially small water. And it's funny because I always think about like where I hunt and then compared to where you hunt. So obviously you're not putting birds on land, but sloughs and whatnot, if you sneak up on a lot of birds or drive by a lake and you see it, on the edge of a lake, it's probably half and half, or there's probably more birds on land than in the actual water. So, take some full bodies out. And we actually started doing this year with ducks and geese, adding more full bodies on land and less in the water. And it seemed to work out a little bit better.
Yeah. I think that's a good technique because a lot of guys want to throw decoys in front of them because they're worried that if they don't have the front loaded up in front of them, that the birds are going to land somewhere where they don't want. From my experience, and again, this is just my personal experience, so someone out there is going to be cussing me out when they're behind the steering wheel because they're thinking I'm crazy and this is not accurate for their area. But for me, I've seen most geese, if I'm hunting on a pond or a body of water where there's land behind me, geese will prefer to land in the water because it's safer, away from the land, and they will swim up, right?
Right.
And when they feel comfortable, they jump up and they go feed or whatever. So the more that you can show on the water or on the land replicates more geese that have landed in the water and successfully swam up there and started feeding and they're still alive. So
and yeah, the whole comfort level. Again.
Exactly. So you're building that comfort. So don't focus as much on, oh, we got a big knot of birds behind us on the bank. All the birds are just going to land right there. I mean, it probably can happen, but from what I've seen, birds just seem to be hardwired to land in that water, especially if you can get the wind set up properly. They want to land in that water and then walk up and when they feel comfortable. So
right.
If your situation allows for that setup, it can be deadly.
I was thinking, anytime that I go and try and take pictures of birds landing in the water, wherever I go, if I sneak in on some or whatever, there's always birds on land, and it takes, one bird to see you and one starts going towards the water, they all get back in the water. So definitely a comfort and safety, they just go where they know. So try adding and see if it helps you out at all.
Yep. And, my next point is kind of similar to that. And, it's primarily, unfortunately, a lot of my tips are kind of focused on geese a little bit. Some of them kind of overlap, but it just seems like we have more geese here. We hunt a lot more geese. It's just what I know better. And this is another one that I knew beforehand, but hearing Field talk about it in his seminar, it jarred me again. So this tip is not groundbreaking in any sense, but I'm going to hopefully approach it in the same way that he did, where it makes more sense to people. So a lot of people want, and this has to do with calling to geese, right? So you're calling to a flock of geese, and most people say, okay, they turn, they're coming to us. Okay, don't overdo it. Don't go crazy, whatever. People don't often realize that geese on the ground are not calling to say, hey, you guys come over here and eat the food that we found. They're saying, hey, if you come over here to eat the food that I found, we're going to have problems. So it's basically they're defending, right? They're defending the food that they found because he's like, most geese, they feel comfort in numbers, right? But they're not going to say, hey, I'm going to feed you before I feed my wife and myself,
right?
Kind of thing. So a lot of guys want to, okay, we got them coming, towards us, cut down the calls, be quiet, just let them finish. If they slide a little bit, you call, whatever. And Field said this perfectly in a seminar. He said, do you know what sound a goose makes when he's afraid? Like what his warning sound is? And everyone's kind of looking around and we're like, well, he goes, they don't make a sound. He's like, it's silence. When they're scared, they are silent. He's like, think about this. Have you ever, jump shot a pond or something like that? And, you climb up over the dam, and when you stick your head up over the dam and that first goose sees you, what do? They all stand up and they look, and they're dead silent. And they're like, oh crap, what is that, right? They're nervous. So there's absolutely no reason, if everything's okay as far as naturally, for you to be quiet when birds are approaching. And in fact, it's actually better to be a little more aggressive, because the closer they get, the more loud you're saying, if you put your feet down on this field, we're going to have problems because this is my food, right? That's really what the call is communicating to them is back off. I'm the dominant bird or birds. This is our field, not, being quiet. And what geese don't understand is if they were quiet, that would signal probably fear or something unnatural to those approaching birds, and they might go on. But instead, by making noise, they're communicating to that bird as, I've got something here that I'm willing to protect. So one tip that you can do, this is not groundbreaking either, but when you set your spread up, you can actually turn a couple geese in the pocket towards the back of the spread. So essentially they would be facing the approaching birds that would be coming into your kill hole. And what you're basically replicating is you're replicating those geese aggressively calling to those new birds approaching, saying, if you land here, we're going to have problems. And that's exactly what they'll do, because they're saying, well, that's where the food's at, especially those migrators. They're like, hey, I'm not from around here. I need something to eat. These guys got it going on. I'm going there. So if you don't do that already, you can turn a couple in your kill hole. Oftentimes you face them still into the wind, like they're walking from the kill hole into the spread. Try turning a couple around. That's going to communicate to those approaching birds that, hey, if you land here, we got a problem. So you're protecting that food source that they so desperately are trying to find.
Scavengers. So I was reading an article about it was a behaviorist, or I don't know what you call them, but the same thing with a duck feeding chuckle. Essentially, it is not. Yep. It's not, it's food. It's, if you get near me, my mate is going to attack you, is what right. the hens are saying. So same thing, you get over here, we're going to have some problems. So, that's pretty, I never thought about the turning them in a hole as far as a communication device, and saying, stay out of here. And that's a good, I wonder if that will change them landing closer, or if they land further away because of that.
Well, I mean, we've talked about it before, and I think Scott Trinan talks about this in Bad Grammar. I've had it where birds are literally about to put their feet on the deck, and I just hammer them real hard, and they'll lift up a little bit more, and they'll slide 5, 6, 7 yards up into the spread further. And that works. I'm telling you right now, that works.
We did that a couple years ago, and it was you and I were calling, and they were out of range, and we both just started hammering it, and they came up, and it was a massacre. That was just a dirty time.
Right.
But
so,
yeah.
I think that the moral of the story here is that, don't be afraid to call, because if it took you calling to those birds to turn them or to get them interested in your spread, that's what they're interested in. It's because they see the birds, they see the field, they hear your calling. The whole thing, the whole cocktail is what they're interested in. When you pull one of those things off the table and you make it silent, they're like, okay, what's going on? Did they see something that scared them? Like, why are they quiet now? What's the deal? They're not hardwired to think that, oh, maybe they're trying to hide this from us. They're thinking, they don't have anything further that they want to, they're not scared of us anymore. They're not defending this from us anymore. So why would we want to go there, kind of thing?
Right. Ooh. So it's almost like reverse psychology on our part.
Right.
I like it. All right. Next one. And we talked about this one before as far as divers, but flagging for ducks and, getting that extra motion. And it's funny because I was reading an article on this today, and the guy was saying, all these migrators, all these mallards are, just flying sky high, going to a field like a quarter mile away. We couldn't do anything. And, my buddy pulled out a flag, and he starts hitting it, just jumping around, and all of a sudden these birds start breaking, and they start coming in, and flocks behind them start coming down. And it just took that little bit to turn those birds. So that got me thinking to one of the first goose hunts I had this year, and we didn't kill any geese, but there were tons of migrators flying over, goose migrators. And, we're sitting there with flags, and duck season wasn't in yet, but we had ducks circling us. And it's like, what is going on here? We're trying to call the geese in, and we have ducks trying to land on us. So, that was pretty cool too, to read it and then think back of, oh, I already did that, even though we couldn't harvest any birds. But maybe you can talk to the divers a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, divers, they're attracted to motion, black and white. So, you can put the spinners on your boat or your blind where they just kind of spin around in the wind. That level of motion alone can be deadly. I've seen them on days respond to mojos really well. I've also seen days where they don't respond to them really well. So I think motion is something that, I really worry late in the year about using it. It's just, I think birds are starting to get smart. I think that there's just an education that's going on with the mojo style ducks. And I think that we're starting to see the industry try to be a little more creative in ways they create motion. You're seeing water bubblers now and different styles and mechanisms to create motion. And I think that's really what it takes. It takes a variety of things, whether it be flags or decoys or whatever you do. If you just, and I know that there's guys that have, hunted this year and set 4 mojos out in the field and had mallards killing themselves to get on top of them and stuff. And that happens. But, if you're hunting high pressure public ground, you got to be careful with some of that stuff. And just like, when we had the guy from Mojo on here, some days they're exactly what you need. Other days they're not what you need. And it's just, it's knowing when to say, okay, today's not the day, and pull them in, or, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But, I find myself coming back on this show pretty much every time we talk about anything to what Sean Stahl said when we interviewed him. Everything's a tool, and you do what you have to do to get the birds to do what you want them to do. Mm-hmm. And you use whatever tool that you have at your disposal that makes them or helps you accomplish that goal. So whether it's decoys, calls, flags, whatever it is, it's all a tool. And, every job has the right tool for the job. That's what separates a good hunter from an average hunter. Who can figure it out? Who can figure out what that tool is that day?
Right. And not, we talk about it all the time too. Don't be afraid to try it, because it might be it might make the difference, and that might be the best hunt of your life. But so many people hesitate to make a change in the middle of a hunt. Say, well, we planned it like this. Well, if you planned it like that and it isn't going how you planned it so far, don't be afraid to change it.
Yep. No doubt. All right. I got a good one here. And I know everybody listening to this show at one point has experienced this or has been this person.
Wait,
so
can I say one more thing about the last comment? When you said that, the birds are definitely catching on to that, I think proof of that would just the debate of juvie snows versus adult snows, and seeing the dramatic, separation of how easy it is to kill the juvies versus the adults, and how they learn, they catch on. Like they're not, some days they seem that they don't know anything, and some days they seem like they're super smart. So, I think we have good points. So, all right, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. And actually, one of my points in the future that I'm going to touch on actually dovetails into that really particular piece that you were bringing on at the end there. But the next thing I wanted to mention was everybody out there starts with a call at some point, whether duck call, goose call, you start at some point and you probably sound terrible, right? Or you've been in the blind with someone who's either just started or hasn't really practiced much and they're terrible, right? And the way that it typically works is whoever's the best on the call tends to stay on the call and work the birds, and the other guys just kind of whatever. And my tip here is you are never going to get better at using your call in the field unless you use your call in the field. And what I mean by that is there's been days where I think I'm ready to take the stage in my basement, or in my truck. Sound great. I get out in the field. You get out in some open spaces, you hear some echoes, and I'm like, ooh, that doesn't sound so good, right? But I want to give you a time that when you're in the blind, and whether you're with a group of 4 guys, 6 guys, 8 guys, 2 guys, I would encourage everybody to call. And this is a little counterintuitive because a lot of times when you hear the term wall of sound, right? Wall of sound, it's a negative connotation, right? It's like, oh, you don't want to blow them out or you don't want to do this, that, and the other. I'm going to give you an example. When you're singing karaoke or you're singing in the car and it's just you, everybody that can hear you can tell when you miss the pitch or you say the wrong word or your voice squeaks or cracks or whatever it is. But when you're at a Journey concert and you're singing Don't Stop Believing with 20,000 other people, nobody can tell whose voice sucks and whose doesn't. No one can tell who sounds just like the singer and all that kind of stuff. My point here is if you see birds way off, they're way off, and you just want to try, you're trying to get these birds to give you a look. It is not going to hurt you to have every single person in that blind get on their call and give it to them. Mm-hmm. Because one person screaming at a football game makes a lot less noise than 100,000 people screaming at a football game. And it's no different. You're trying to project sound as far as you possibly can to get their attention. Now, when they get their attention and you bring them in closer, then you may need to be a little more careful about the way you call and that kind of thing. But it's not going to hurt you to let everybody in that blind cut loose. So if you got a call on your neck and you're never going to get better unless you try, and you're going to learn from those experiences. So that's a tip that I will tell everybody, that if you're in the blind, you got birds way off and you're just trying to get them to give you a look. I don't care if you're field Hudnall sitting down at the end of that blind. I'm going to pick my call up too. And then once they get close, I'm going to put it down and pick up my shotgun and let you finish them off. But it's not going to do anybody any harm by giving them a try from far out. So don't be afraid to project sound, even if it's bad sound at that time, because chances are those birds are far enough off where, even if you sound terrible, if they're not going to give you, they can't even consider giving you a look if they don't hear you. So if they hear they don't like what they hear, so be it. At least they heard you and you got some practicing. So that's my tip. Don't be afraid to give them a call, especially when they're far out. Get yourself some opportunity to learn, practice, and get more comfortable using the call in a blind when it's cold or with your gloves or whatever you want to do. That's the only way you're going to get better.
I like that. And that takes me back to Duckman Jones, the Antonio Duckman Jones podcast. And, you see all these pro callers and they have a few different duck calls on their lanyard. And why is that? Some days their acrylics don't sound good or they're not working, so they go to wood. The wood might not be working. They have a poly on there, whatever it might be. Like different sounds on different days will do the job. So, if you have, I don't know, it takes me to photography and thinking like one of the perfect pictures is actually a combination. It's a HDR. It's a combination of 3 pictures, underexposed, correctly exposed, and overexposed, and it joins to make the perfect thing. So like you said, it might not all be good on its own, but once it's together, it could get the job done. So I like that point. Very nice. Did I just ramble a little bit there?
No, you're good. I think you were complimenting me, so go ahead.
Yeah. No, that's good stuff. All right. One that I have that I have never done, but another one that just makes sense and something that, I'm not a newbie, but I'm going to try it out for sure. Convince ducks that the water is shallower than what it is. And how you do that would be to take full bodies out and, think if you have motion stakes. So they go up and they have a little clip on them. Those will fit right inside of a small diameter PVC pipe. So if your water's 3 foot deep, put the PVC down. Obviously, you're going to paint it, a dark colored green or black even. Stick it down, and what the guy was talking about in his article that I was reading, if they're migrating and they're spending all this energy, the last thing they want to do is dive for food. They still want to feel the safety, so they want to be in the water. But if you can make that water seem like it's only a couple inches deep, then that is a bonus in your pocket there. So that's one way to elevate the full bodies and think that the food's right at their feet and it's an easier feed for them.
Yeah, I mean, that makes complete sense. I've never thought about doing that just because I feel, I never really thought about building up, a full body like that. But I do see how, the logic is certainly there. And I mean, naturally, particularly with divers and stuff, where you have areas that they can reach the food easily is where they congregate. So whether that be shallow water or high vegetation that comes up closer to the surface, that kind of thing, those are the things that drive ducks to certain areas. So,
another thing I read today, this isn't, well, it kind of is, but, a tidal area like where you hunt, the one guy would take a shovel with him, and whenever the tide went out, he would go and get shovels full of the mud and flip them over. So just a shovel full, flip it over, and just that little bit of a mound pretty much increases your spread size. You could double it or triple it or whatever you want to do. But those little bit of shadows created makes it look like there's a lot more ducks, especially low-flying ducks like divers. So
yeah, I can see that for sure.
There you go.
Boom. Cool. All right. Well,
ooh, Dan with the diver tips. What?
Fake news. Hashtag fake news. So my next tip is going to pretty much apply to both ducks and geese. And I think everyone could probably relate to this, but how many times have you had birds coming in and you got a small group in front, maybe 2 or 3, and you got a bigger knot back behind, and the first ones come in, you're like, all right, let those land. We're going to let these back ones work in, and then we'll take them all at one time. And for whatever reason, the front ones that land or don't land, they booger off and they take the back group with them. Is that right? You ever have that happen?
Too many times.
I'm here to tell you, if you get that situation, whether the birds land or they don't land, but they work within your shooting range, if those first group of birds booger out of there, that second group will not do it. They will not come into where you're at. And here's the logic behind that. And this is super simple. I'm not breaking ground here again. If I'm following in, okay, let's say, Dan, I'm with a group of guys and you're with a group of guys, and we're all single dudes. We're out looking for chicks, right? And I see you dudes come rolling out of a bar. I'm going to be like, well, there must not be any chicks in there. Why am I going to go in there when these dudes are rolling out? So I'm going to go on to the next spot. They're thinking the same thing. They're thinking there's no food, or there's something they saw that they didn't like. There's something that's threatening in there. Whatever it is, there's something in there that if it's not good enough for them, it's not going to be good enough for us. So if you get an opportunity in those first group, even if you've got a knot of 50 birds behind, if those 2 or 3 in front of you don't do it and you let them fly off, they will take the other group with them every time. So do yourself a favor. Take advantage of the shots that you have and live with them. Otherwise, you will probably come out of that with nothing to show for it. So as hard as that is to do, and you may even educate more birds by these, that back group, but you will not take any birds if the first group doesn't do it correctly. So I've had it, birds come in, they land, they float around. I've got more geese coming. Those 2 geese get up off the water and take the back group with them every time. So don't do that.
That's such an awful feeling. It really is. It's like, it just breaks your heart.
I mean, I can't tell you how many hunts, and when I say this, I literally mean like almost every hunt. I leave the field and think either out loud to whoever I'm hunting with or to myself, we should have killed this many more birds. Or, if we didn't have our limit, we should have had our limit if we would have killed these birds.
Yep.
So, those are the types of situations that might make or break the difference between a limit that day or not a limit that day.
Mm-hmm. And piggybacking off you a little bit, talking about birds out front and birds behind you. One of the new things is, the A-frame blinds and the tangle-free panel blinds, stuff like that. And it does seem cool. You get to sit there and chat with your buddies, and, you don't have to lay in the middle of a field, all that. One thing that a lot of guys do, and if you're hunting the edge of a lake or edge of a river or whatever you're doing, a lot of people do not cover their back. So you might take like half of an A-frame and put it out in front because you think the birds are coming from one way. Well, it doesn't take too much for them to get behind you. And if they can see a little bit of movement or whatever it might be, try and tuck into a tree, try and tuck into a bank. Try and, just, watch your 6, so to speak.
That tip essentially goes right into my last tip. Was that your 5th one right there?
That was 5th, but I have another one.
Oh, okay. Well, since you have a little bonus, I'm gonna tag mine into what you're saying.
Okay.
My last tip is, there's a lot of things to consider when you're hunting, right? A million different things to consider. The number one focus should be every single hunt should be your concealment. The number one thing above all else. And the reason for that is because those birds that are approaching your position, and you really have to sort of keep some perspective for some of these things to really ring true. But literally, they know that their life depends on making good decisions about where they feed, right? So if you approach it in the same manner, you will be that much more successful. Their life depends on being able to pick out and identify threats on the ground before they land. If you brush yourself in like your life depended on it, you'll be so much more successful. I mean, think about how much of a pain in the neck it is sometimes to brush your blinds and go through all that to make sure you got a good hide. It is a pain in the neck. But, I can't tell you how many times people, birds are coming in and they flare off. Oh, there was shine on the decoys, or, oh, we got to rearrange this, or, oh, your calling sucked. But 90% of the time, I guarantee they saw you. That's usually what it is, because no decoy spread looks the same. All the decoys, geese in the field, they look, like Sean Stahl said, the dump spread. They're just everywhere. Sometimes there's no rhyme or reason. Have you ever sat around and listened to geese? They make some really crazy sounds sometimes. It's not your calling. It's probably that they saw you. 90% of the time, they saw you. They picked you out because you probably skimped on your hide, or you didn't brush your blind in after the snowstorm that knocked a bunch of it off, or whatever it is. But what I'll tell you is, your scouting, your calling, your decoys, none of that matters unless you're brushed in well and your hide is good. Because you could have field Hudnall in the blind with you out of a hunting over a spread of stuffer decoys, scouted on a field by Tony Van Moore. But if they see you, they're not coming there, right? So kind of like you talked about panel blinds and A-frame blinds, it's a huge benefit to be able to get fully inside something, or a pit blind or whatever, that, fully encapsulates you. That is huge for cover. The drawback of that is, though, it's a much larger structure, unless you're a pit underground, but it's a much larger structure that you have to take the time to brush in effectively. Layout blinds, on the other hand, they give you that lower profile, hide that puts you right in the spread. But the drawback of those as well is, you're confined in your movement. They can be less comfortable, makes you more fidgety. Even in a layout blind, if you're moving around, they'll see you in there. So it's finding that middle ground, but always, always, always keep in mind that if you can't hide effectively, all of the other time, money, and effort that you're putting into the other aspects of your hunt is for naught. Because if they can see you while they're circling the spread, and that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to identify danger. If they see you, it's over. So keep that in mind. Think about your concealment. And during the off season, think about ways to better conceal yourself than you did last year. Do you need to build a new blind? Do you need to buy a new one? Do you need to mud them in, brush them in? How could you set it up better where the sun is in a more favorable location? All of those things goes into that hide, which is just critically, critically important for every single hunt.
That's tough to top. But I mean, when you think about it, and we mentioned it before, scouting and your hide, and think about, like you said, their lives depend on being able to pick out threats on the ground. So if you scout on Monday and there's a ton of birds in the field, and then Tuesday, they know that it was safe in that field and there are no big structures, whatnot. They go to the roost pond and they're ready to go eat the next morning. And now there's a big A-frame blind in the middle of a field and it's not brushed in. They're going to get weary of it. So, I mean, You made great points there, and their life depends on it. So, and like I said, it's so funny to think about, because some days it just seems like you can do whatever you want and your blind can look semi-awful and you still kill birds. And, other days it's just not going to happen. So my last tip, which does go into concealment, and especially guys with boats, and it is exactly boats and kayaks and canoes, try, unless you have that thing decked out and brushed in to where you can't see anything, get away from the boat, or get the boat away from you, I should say. And that's something that I don't do enough. I do take, mesh netting and throw a bunch of vegetation over it, but something I'll do a lot more this year, I think, is definitely put the boat further and further away from where I'm at.
Yeah, I've seen plenty of guys that hunt out of a water blind and tie their boat up to the blind and wonder why birds won't finish.
Yeah. And that, we get questions, we get emails about guys that have, just straight metal boats, aluminum boats, and there's no paint on it, and they wonder why birds are flaring, but they don't want to tell their buddy that they need to paint their boat. Well, just get away from it. And there's some, we hunt some spots where you have to hunt out of your boat. You just have to. So, getting that blind or definitely working on the hide, like we mentioned before, is just vital to having success.
Yeah. And, I recently read through, if for anyone that doesn't know, on the HP Outdoors website, on the actual podcast pages of each individual episode, there's a link on there for a survey that we have put out a while back. And we just track information about the show and we take feedback through there. So recently I printed all those out and was reading through them. And one of the feedback points that someone made was that they were irritated or frustrated that we talk about scouting so much, because and their frustration is rooted that, hey, they're a 9-to-5 guy, work every day, get to do, kind of weekend warrior battle thing, no different than us really. And, they've only got a handful of properties that they can hunt and they don't really get a chance to scout them. So it's, they just got to kind of roll the dice. And they were frustrated or, irritated that we emphasize scouting so much. And I think that point is valid. I truly do. Because I believe that a lot of people have the same restraints and same struggles. Having said that, if you're hunting fields time and time again that don't have birds flying over them or coming to them, you're not going to have that much success, period, end of story. However, if you do have fields that, where you have somewhat of a chance to have success, if you're not hunting the X, your life gets that much harder, because the birds don't want to go there naturally. Their mind is they're going somewhere else. You're trying to convince them otherwise, whether it's this pocket of water or that field or whatever it is. You're trying to convince them to do something else. And what they're going to do before they commit to your spot is they're going to evaluate that as to why should I do that? Why is that a better spot than what I was planning to do? And if they can see a couple lumps of grass or whatever, or a shiny boat down there, you can bet they're not going to be convinced that that's a better opportunity than where they were going to go. So the deck is already stacked against you. If you're not on the X, you have to be that much more concealed in meticulous in your approach. And I'm kind of losing my train of thought here, so I'm sort of rambling a little bit, but essentially, the point here is if you expect to be successful, you got to be convincing. I mean, when you wake up in the morning and you have a plan for your day and someone says, "Hey, I want you to do this," or "Would you want to do this?" They better bring you a pretty compelling argument as to why you should do that, or you're going to be like, "No, I got plans to go do this today." Right?
Right.
It's essentially this. It's the same deal, right? I mean, we're convincing them to do something that they were planning not to do. And if you're saying, "Hey, come down here and feed next to this shiny 16-foot canoe that's got 3 dark shadows sitting inside of it," probably not going to happen.
I'll say one more thing too. One for that guy, if expand your hunting buddies and possibly switch days of scouting, if that's one possibility. 2, if you, and this goes to another tip, if you hunt a field where you see birds landing but you can't see exactly where they are, before you set up in the morning, go and make sure that you find where they have been feeding. And it's not real difficult to find, especially if you're in a cornfield or in a clover field.
It'd be feathers everywhere.
Feathers,
poop,
and just
that kind of stuff.
Feathers, poop, and more importantly, the food is gone. And set up where there is food. So if you see them all land in one spot, go to that spot in the morning or that afternoon, whenever they're gone, and check it out and see what is left, and if it's worth going there, or if you need to move 50 yards from where they were actually feeding to get into more food for them. And we've had that happen a couple times where we get set up and just the feeling of, yeah, they were here and they know that they need to go about 40, 50 yards over to the side. We should have set up over there because that's where all the birds are landing. So just another thought when you have your headlamp on in the morning and checking things out to set up.
Yeah, I mean, and this gets really into the nitty gritty of, identifying a field and how you're going to approach to it. But, I'll never forget, we hunted an early season morning and the birds were coming to this field, and this particular field, you could not see the back of it clearly because of the way that it sloped. So there was sort of a blind spot in the field. So you'd see the birds land, and when they landed in the field, they would disappear because they were down in a depression, so you couldn't see them. The next morning, we set up that hill a little bit more just for kind of visibility purposes to be able to try to pull from areas in. And the birds went down in that hole and landed borderline out of range. So we kind of battled that all morning. I truly believe that one of the reasons they did that was because, early PA season, I mean, those roads are getting rode hard by guys scouting, and there's cars sitting on the road looking, and those birds get nervous when cars that are normally driving by every day, there's more of them and they stop. That makes birds nervous. So I believe that they realized that when they were down in that hole where people couldn't see them, less cars stopped. So they kept going to that spot because they felt more safe that way. Things like that are make or break. I mean, if we would have been down in that hole, we wouldn't have had to pick up a call. We wouldn't have had to do anything but load our shotguns because those birds were dumping in there.
They were locked
any kind of way. Yeah.
And that's the thing too. It was halfway through the morning and we get up and the birds were where we set up, but you look at where they were landing that morning and that's where all the fresh clover was at. Like a ton of food was down there, and there's absolutely, they were picking it to the dirt where we were at. So yeah, that's That's almost an hour worth of tips. 45 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, I hope we didn't ramble too much, but I think that for guys that, like we said, are just kind of getting into it and have the bug and want to get serious about it, these are things that you kind of have to think about that, if you're just showing up and hunting with your buddies or you're hunting with a guide or something, that they've probably already taken into consideration. So hopefully you guys got some value out of this. If you've got additional tips that you like, that you want to share with us, hit us up on social media, come into the Facebook group, the HP Outdoors Waterfowl Podcast Listeners Group, and chat us up in there. You can send us an email at info@hpoutdoors.com, however you like to reach out to us. But we'd like to share those with the other listeners of the show. So definitely, we appreciate all the feedback and the other insights that people can offer. So anything else you got here, Dan, before we wrap this puppy up?
No, hopefully we can get Field on here and pick his brain for an hour or so and just hammer him with questions. And, I think that would be a good episode. And, I think that's about it. I think we're going to start warming up here and can get out and clean the garage and get everything cleaned and put away and start thinking about early season.
Yep, it's not too far away. All right, well, that's going to do it for episode 62 of the HP Outdoors Waterfowl Podcast. Appreciate you guys checking us out and checking out our advanced waterfowl strategies. Hopefully that gives you some helpful insight for this off season so that you can prepare yourself to be more successful next year. If you're just new to the show, you can catch all the past episodes at hpoutdoors.com. You can check us out on iTunes, subscribe, give us a 5-star review. That helps more hunters just like you find the show. So until next time, for Dan, I'm Josh. Take care.